Discover the amazing transformation of a lazy boy who realized the incredible value of time. Jake Thompson sat in his grandfather's neglected farmhouse, fingers glued to the controller, eyes glued to the television screen. Day after day etched into the wallpaper, days lost to digital realms while the real world faded. He could almost hear the disapproving whispers of family echo through the rotting wood, judgmental glances as they glanced over their shoulders at the lazy boy who failed to live the legacy his grandfather had toiled for. The farmhouse, once vibrant with harvest celebrations and family gatherings, now stood silent, a ghost of expectations trapped within cracked walls. The letter, stamped with a return address that felt otherworldly, lay untouched on the kitchen table. Family reunion, Jake read, a celebration of his grandfather's life, a life filled with late-night barn repairs and early morning milkings. His heart dropped deeper into the pit of his stomach. The thought of facing noses turned up, glances of pity, sickened him. What would they think of me? Panic surged. Was he forever destined to live stuck between dusty walls and video game screens? Then, beneath the reunion notice, a revelation. He was the beneficiary of a piece of farmland, a hidden legacy left with the hope that it would provide a spark of inspiration. Instead, it felt like an anchor, dragging him down into the mire of responsibility he had always avoided. The decision loomed like a thundercloud. Embrace the challenge of farming, or sell out, ease into a life of comfort, disappointing everyone once again. Miss Helen, his neighbor, had become an unintended lifeline, sharing stories on her porch, her gentle laughter slipping through the tension that clung to him. Sitting there, Jake felt the compelling call of the soil. Her tales expanded with each sunset, gradually revealing the joys of nurturing land, a privilege infused with love and purpose. But as the shadows of doubt lengthened, comfortable visions of lazy afternoons clashed violently with stabs of burgeoning determination. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Yet, just as his feet began to find balance, a storm brewed in the distance. The developer, slick and suited, swept through town like a wild rumor, laying plans to transform the farmland into a commercial hub. Suddenly, Jake's world shifted. The land once imagined as a second chance felt like an ultimatum. Sell and secure an easy future, or fight for the legacy that his grandfather worked so tirelessly to build. Could he truly uphold the weight of family history, or was he still just that lazy boy lost in digital fantasies? The reunion crept closer, a ticking clock of family expectations waiting with open arms. As he stared out at the rows of corn swaying in the evening breeze, desperation filled his chest. Could he fight for something he had blindly turned his back on? Hidden truths twisted like roots beneath him, grounding him, yet holding him back. The frayed edges of his identity stood before him, an inevitable confrontation approaching like the approaching storm. Would he reclaim it, or would he shuffle back to the safety of ignorance? Caught in the throes of turmoil, Jake could sense his moment of reckoning drawing near, and in that dizzying heart of uncertainty, he grappled with the hardest choice of his life. Doubt gnawed at Jake as he grappled with the impending reunion. Every evening he sat on the porch with Miss Helen, the neighboring farmer, her weathered hands demonstrating the resilience of the earth. She cultivated her patch of land with a passion that seemed to radiate the warmth of life itself. Jake watched her plant seeds with precision, each placement a metaphor for hope and possibility. How easy it was to slip into stagnation, he mused, watching the mundane verses of his life fold comfortably around him. Yet, as the days hurried forward, so too did the realization that he could not slip away as easily this time. The deadline loomed. Jake felt the weight of the letter in his pocket, the promise of a legacy that seemed to suffocate him. What if he rejected his grandfather's gift and let it slip through his fingers? The thought of the developer's plans drummed relentlessly in his mind, mocking his apathy. The urge to flee, to lock himself away in the familiar security of his digital fortress, was strong. But with each stirring of the wind against the cornstalks, voices of the past, echoes of his grandfather's cracked, calloused hands, urged him to reconsider. One afternoon, he found himself at the empty house farm, the dusty floors creaking underfoot. Sunlight streamed through the grime-coated windows, illuminating the remnants of laughter and heartache. As he stepped further into the living room, he hesitated, catching a glimpse of himself in the mirror hanging across the wall. The reflection of a boy still clinging to the symbols of childhood struck him. He had hidden behind children's games for too long, wrapped in his cocoon of comfort. "Breathe, Jake," he whispered to himself, pressing his palms against the table. "Time waits for no one." He felt an odd flutter of energy race through him, igniting his resolve. Instead of retreating into self-pity, he could reclaim the old farmhouse as a canvas for potential. The land offered endless possibilities. He would breathe life back into it and, in turn, breathe life back into himself. The escapism of video games could no longer captivate him. There was a real game to play, one that forced him to grow and confront truths. His fingers grazed a faded envelope on the table, the destination unimportant, yet within it held messages of the past. The contents were heartbeats of history, a collection of letters from his grandfather detailing the trials and triumphs of farm life, the beauty of toil, and the legacy woven into every cornfield. Each letter narrated a small battle, revealing the grit behind the joy. Fueled by newfound determination, Jake decided to face the developer. The time had come for him to learn the ways of the land, but more critically, to boldly advocate for what belonged to his family. He sought out Miss Helen, who listened to his aspirations and offered him her gardener's knowledge. "You'll always face storms, Jake," she said, gaze lingering on the horizon. "But every storm passes, and you grow stronger from it." Days and nights melted into one another as he immersed himself in farm life, shoveling manure, digging rows for crops, and studying plant growth cycles. The initial disorientation soon transformed into lucid understanding. With each new skill acquired, he found pieces of himself hidden beneath layers of indolence. As the reunion drew closer, Jake felt a tremor of anxiety intermingled with excitement. Would his family see the transformation he had begun? His growth was not merely about tilling the earth. It was about reclaiming a sense of self-worth, about revealing a man he hoped was buried within the shameful layers of laziness. But where would this burgeoning spirit lead him? Just as he stood poised to confront his family's expectations, a familiar shadow fell over the land. The sleek figure of the antagonist developer returned, and with him an ultimatum that threatened to dismantle everything Jake had set in motion. Would he act decisively or yield to the fear of losing what little confidence he had amassed? The ground beneath him trembled, whispering ominously. The true test of his growth was on the horizon. The sun hovered low, casting elongated shadows across the fields as Jake prepared to confront the unraveling situation. Each footstep felt heavier, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. The developer's anticipated arrival loomed like a dark cloud, threatening to eclipse the small victories he had achieved on this land. "Stay grounded," he reminded himself, inhaling deeply as he gazed toward the distant horizon where the land met the sky. The perseverance of the crops, nurtured by toil and care, mirrored his own internal struggle. He had discovered strength he didn't know existed. Now he had to summon enough courage to stand against the storm that was brewing. Jake's thoughts swirled wildly like the wind rustling through the leaves. Would his family's perception of him shatter if he failed to protect his inheritance? A flicker of doubt clawed at his confidence, threatening to undo weeks of hard work and newfound clarity. With clenched fists, he reminded himself that he was no longer the boy who hid behind screens. He had transformed. He took one last glance around the plot he had nurtured, shame melting away under the sun's glow. Each furrow, a testament to his battle against complacency. Every plant, a symbol of growth. His grandfather's legacy rested not just in the land, but also in the perseverance it symbolized. The connection to his roots flashed brightly in his mind, igniting the determination to defend it fiercely. When the sleek figure arrived, justice and greed wrapped up in one. Jake's heart raced as he stepped forward to meet his adversary. The developer's confident smirk and polished demeanor did little to intimidate him. Standing taller, he drew from the strength of every letter he had read and every moment spent learning the rhythms of the farm. This was his fight, and he wouldn't back down. "Jake, I'm here to finalize our offer. You've had ample time to consider it," the developer said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "Selling would benefit you tremendously. Think of what you could achieve with this money. It's the future, kid." "No," Jake interrupted, his voice steadying with resolve. "You don't understand. This land isn't merely an investment to me. It's my heritage." The developer's demeanor shifted. The mask of congeniality faltered. "You're risking everything. You've lived in the shadow of this farm long enough. Vulnerability is just that, a risk." "I'm aware of the risks," Jake replied, confidence surging with every word. "But I discovered the value that comes from hard work and authenticity. This isn't just about money, it's about identity and respect for where I come from." The developer paused, assessing the determination written across Jake's face. There was a tense silence, but in that moment, Jake realized he could leverage not only the land, but also the strength he had forged. Trusting in his instincts, he pressed forward, embracing the uncertainty as an ally rather than an adversary. "Let's discuss the future together. I want to reinvest. I want my family's legacy to thrive," Jake offered boldly, his heart racing in his chest. "Wise decision or foolish bravado?" the developer asked, a glimmer of interest igniting in his dark eyes. "You have my attention, Jake." The dialogue shifted into a negotiation, a battle of wits where Jake's voice became louder with each passing moment. Yet, as he felt the weight of his convictions pushing him forward, he recognized the fragility of his newfound strength. The hours spent learning, the sweat poured into every inch of land, it all culminated in this moment of both potential triumph and dire consequence. Would this be the point at which he emerged as a steward of his family's legacy, or would it slip through his fingers, drowned in doubt and greed? The delicate balance of his growth hinged on the decision he was about to make, and the stakes could not be higher. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the land in twilight, Jake realized he faced more than just a negotiation. The true battle was internal. It was about owning his journey and asserting his right to claim what was rightfully his. What sacrifice would he be willing to make to secure his family's future? Would he risk everything for a legacy, or would fear win out? In that crucial moment of reckoning, a sudden realization dawned on him. Tomorrow, he would have to make a profound choice, one that could either affirm his newfound identity or drag him back down the path of complacency. The true test awaited him, and he was ready to fight with all that he had. As dawn broke, Jake's anxious heart beat in rhythm with the sun's ascent, illuminating the fields that had become so sacred to him. Last night's resolution lingered in his mind like a fragrant bloom in the air, reminding him of the stakes at play. With each ray that kissed the earth, he felt the pulling urgency of the day ahead. Today was not just about choice, it was about taking ownership of his future. He slipped into his work boots and made his way to the barn where the steady rhythm of his daily routine awaited. The familiar scent of hay filled his lungs, a grounding reminder of the life he had chosen. This was the sanctuary he had cultivated, a manifestation of hard-earned lessons etched in every corner. Yet, embedded in his routine was a greater realization. Jake was not merely a caretaker, he was becoming a leader. As he moved about, tending to the animals, a wave of clarity surged through him. Each moment spent here fortified his resolve. It was time to gather allies, friends and mentors who had witnessed his journey. With every brush of a horse's mane and every reassuring pat on a cow's flank, he recalled the invaluable lessons shared by those before him. It was their wisdom that cultivated his understanding of responsibility, persistence, and integrity, elements he now needed to wield like armor. He busied himself fixing fences, his mind racing with the strategies he would employ in his meeting later that day. The developer's allure was potent. The tempting prospects of financial relief and new beginnings flashed before his eyes. But Jake had come too far to be seduced by the shiny veneer of a quick fix. The more he worked, the more determined he became to protect his roots. Jake grabbed his phone and tapped through old messages, searching for those who believed in him. Each contact was a thread in the tapestry of his support system, individuals connected to the legacy, the farm's history sewn into their lives. With a few quick messages sent, he felt a surge of strength. The response was immediate, his network rallying to share insights, strategies, and reaffirmations of trust. As the sun reached its zenith, a truck rolled up the gravel road. The familiar figure of Uncle Ted stepping out, a smile breaking through the lines of experience etched into his weathered face. A sense of camaraderie washed over Jake, fusing their generational struggle into a single mission. They spoke freely among the crops, exchanging concerns, and it became evident that the strength of community in this endeavor was more significant than any monetary proposal. "Jake, this fight is about more than just the land. It's about who we are," Ted emphasized, his voice steady. "Do you think your grandfather would want you to sell out? You've got to fight like he did, with heart and soul." His words struck deep, colliding with Jake's growing sense of purpose. This was not just about him. It was about heritage and legacy that spanned generations. The emotion swirling within him transformed into determination. The meeting wasn't merely a negotiation. It would be a declaration of his identity. Jake felt a surge of inspiration course through him, ignited by the belief of those around him. The support turned into a collective energy that he could feel deep within his bones. It was more than the endorsement of friends. It was acknowledgement that he could and would reclaim his family's name with pride. As the time approached for the encounter with the developer, Jake took a breath, allowing the calm resolve to wash over him. His heart was racing but steady, fueled not by fear, but by the legacy he was prepared to defend. Yet, just as he stood at the threshold of action, doubt crept in. The developer would be expecting an easy win. Would Jake be able to stand firm, or would he falter under pressure? In that moment of potential breakthrough, a quiet alarm rang within him, a reminder that every battle holds unpredictability. He was ready to embrace the chaos that would inevitably accompany the fight for what was rightfully his identity, his legacy. How far was he willing to go? As he glanced one last time at the flourishing farmland surrounding him, he knew he was on the cusp of something monumental. But would he be able to translate that determination into a victory? Would his newfound strength withstand the imminent pressure? The questions loomed heavy, and as lack of clarity began to coil around his thoughts, a wave of anticipation surged through him. This confrontation was no ordinary negotiation. It was a fight for his very core. Today would define him. But could he navigate the tumult of impending confrontation and emerge victorious? Jake stood at the threshold of uncertainty, his heart racing as he flicks through the context of what would soon unfold. Each tick of the clock echoed not only the passing time, but the mounting pressure that sat heavy on his chest. The developer's proposal loomed like a specter over the farm, tempting him with promises of quick fixes and tantalizing financial relief. But Jake understood that every promise bore a cost he was now unwilling to pay. As he walked toward the meeting place, the nervous energy within him grew, combining with a steely resolve formed in the solitude of his privacy. Morning contemplation. The field stretched before him, vibrant and alive, mirroring the burgeoning strength he felt surging within. This was more than land to him. It was a canvas of memories, of laughter shared with family, and lessons hard fought. He knew that he couldn't let greed strip away the legacy that defined him. With a deep breath, Jake stepped into the conference room, the sterile environment starkly contrasting with the warmth of home. He was greeted by the imposing figure of the developer, whose slick demeanor exuded confidence and an unsettling sense of entitlement. The man slid into the conversation with a practiced ease, outlining the financial prospects that would transform the farm. Jake took a moment to focus inward, allowing silence to cloak his first few words. In the stillness, he felt the weight of his grandfather's heritage pressing against him, a guiding force urging him to speak from the heart. "You don't understand this land," he began, his voice steady, cutting through the developer's rehearsed pitch. "It's not merely a property ripe for profit, it's our legacy. Each inch holds years of our family's love and labor." The developer's expression shifted from interest to annoyance, underscoring the differing mindsets. As Jake articulated his values, community, dedication, preservation, he noticed something transformative happening. The words weren't merely a means to defend himself, they were powerful affirmations of his identity. He wasn't just a young farmer trying to hold on. He was a custodian of tradition, a steward of history. Each rebuttal Jake made pushed him further into a new version of himself. The doubts that had clung to him like shadows dissolved against the clarity of his purpose. The room filled with tension as he saw the developer fidget, an opponent slowly losing control of the narrative. This was not just about resisting an external threat. It was about discovering the strength that came from vulnerability and truth. As the discussions turned into negotiations, Jake began to push back, to articulate alternatives that honored the land's integrity while still considering future opportunities. He felt a surge of empowerment. Not only was he presenting a counter-solution, but he was also claiming agency over his fate. His experience on the farm provided him with unique insights that transformed the dialogue from one of surrender to collaboration. Yet in the back of his mind, a whisper of doubt lingered, threatening to pull him back into insecurity. Would his passion be enough to sway the relentless insistence of greed? Or would he sacrifice another part of his identity in a futile attempt to forge a compromise? The meeting teetered on the edge of a breakthrough, and as tension built, Jake realized he was not just negotiating with an adversary, but with himself. Would he allow fear to dictate his actions, or would he stand firm in the face of a formidable personality intent on erasing his history? With each heartbeat thrumming in his ears, Jake geared himself. This confrontation demanded everything he had discovered about himself. And it was time to showcase resilience, born not of fear, but of unyielding commitment to his family's story. The precarious state of the negotiations left Jake on the brink of either defeat or triumph. But could he continue to harness this newfound power and emerge victorious against the looming threat? The answers hovered just beyond reach as the stakes escalated with each passing minute. How far was he willing to go to protect not just a piece of land, but the essence of who he had become? A tense silence enveloped the conference room, thickening with every moment of uncertainty. Jake felt the heat of the developer's glaring eyes, and a newfound determination clawed within him. He could sense the stakes rising, pushing him to harness the adrenaline coursing through his veins. For the first time, he envisioned the contours of his future not as a victim of circumstance, but as an architect of his own destiny. "Let's talk solutions," Jake asserted, adopting a firm tone that reverberated through the space. "You talk of transformation, but what if we explore a different path, one that honors the land, yet still provides sustainable growth? He was no longer just a young man in a meeting, he was a strategist reclaiming his future. As the developer's smirk faltered, Jake felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. It wasn't enough to simply resist the proposal. He needed to offer something compelling, something that would make the developer reconsider his approach. He likely wouldn't abandon his ambitions, but Jake had learned enough from his family's struggles to know that standing still was not an option. "Here's what I propose," he continued, gathering his thoughts with urgency. "Utilize the resources we have, but rather than bulldozing everything in sight, let's implement gradual changes. Use organic farming techniques that could market our produce as both premium and eco-friendly. We can collaborate with local businesses for distribution, creating a symbiotic relationship that benefits everyone involved." He could sense the shift in energy as he spoke. The developer leaned back, arms crossed, contemplating the feasibility of Jake's plan. Was he winning ground or merely buying time to formulate a rebuttal? In that moment of reflection, doubt crept in again. Would the developer genuinely entertain a partnership based on shared values, or was he merely playing for time? Yet as the developer considered his words, Jake's thoughts drifted to the fields. Each row of crops, each sunrise illuminating dew-kissed mornings, was a reminder of what was at stake. This was more than just financial stability. This was about cultivating a vision that could breathe new life into the farm. In that instant, Jake found clarity about himself. His passion for the land was not merely an emotional outpour, it was a strategic advantage. He recalled times in his childhood when the rhythm of planting and harvesting had taught him patience and resilience. Those lessons became his tools, equipping him to navigate this challenging moment with the agility of— "Look," Jake said, leaning forward, his gaze unwavering. "I know this may not be the outcome you envisioned, but isn't it worth it to pause and consider a sustainable future? We can build something groundbreaking here, a legacy that respects the past and embraces innovation." The developer's brow furrowed, revealing a glimmer of uncertainty, a flicker that brought Jake's determination back into sharp focus. The confrontation was no longer solely with the developer, but with the fear that had threatened to undermine his convictions. He was unwittingly asking himself if he truly believed in the value of his vision enough to stand firm against any opposition. Time pressed against him. Jake felt a rush of urgency accompanied by a renewed sense of purpose. He had entered the room as a defender of his legacy, but he was quickly becoming an innovator, a leader willing to create an alternative narrative. Jake knew he could feel the shift favoring him, but the battle was far from over. The developer still had ample room to negotiate, and Jake sensed an impending conflict that could threaten his emerging position. Would his proposal be embraced, or would resistance come crashing in to extinguish the fledgling hope he had ignited? In that charged atmosphere, a critical question loomed. How far would he go to preserve not just the farm, but the very essence of who he had become? As the minutes ticked on, Jake braced himself for the next round of challenges. The time had come to face an even greater truth about the nature of his fight, for himself, for the farm, and for the unpredictable road ahead. The developer shifted in his seat, the tension palpable as Jake awaited a response. The minutes ticked by slowly, like the long, silent pauses of a storm brewing on the horizon. Each second brought a wave of uncertainty that threatened to crash over him. Yet, just beneath the surface, a resolution surged within, propelling him forward into the unknown. "Jake," the developer finally replied, his tone carefully measured. "Your ideas are interesting, but they seem idealistic. The market demands results and quick changes." "Quick changes?" Jake interrupted, feeling a new spark of defiance. "Isn't that exactly why we're in this predicament? The quick solutions are often the most damaging." His pulse quickened, And for the first time, he realized that his defense of the farm wasn't merely a strategic decision. It was an extension of his identity. Every flaw the developer identified reflected not just business metrics, but Jake's personal values. The developer raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "So, what do you propose? We slow down the pace and risk losing momentum?" Jake leaned back, tapping into his reservoir of knowledge. Years of family experience, of manual labor, of observing the land's unyielding rhythms. This isn't about losing momentum. It's about creating a sustainable future. We could develop a phased plan instead of implementing a drastic overhaul. For instance, let's pilot the organic techniques on a portion of the land first. Track the yield and market response. It would give us invaluable insights and build trust with the community. He could feel the strength of his proposal, seasoned by a delicate blend of pragmatism and idealism. Yet, as confidence filled him, an unsettling thought crept back in. What if his plan seemed naive in the face of corporate interests? Was he ready to go to battle against this seasoned developer, who might see his conviction as a weakness? The developer's eyes narrowed slightly, weighing the words. "You're suggesting we gamble on your untested methods. You know how the industry operates. We can't afford to wait." "Wait or ruin everything," Jake countered, his resolve solidifying further. In this moment, he was all too aware of the stakes. The farm represented not just land or a livelihood, but a legacy grounded in values his family cherished. If he could create a plan that worked, it could offer a roadmap not just for him, but for others who might follow suit. With every pause, Jake's conviction blossomed. Imagine if we could launch a community-supported agriculture program alongside the pilot. It would build local engagement and potentially create loyal customers who value the story behind the product. The silence that followed was suffused with caution, but Jake sensed a shift. The developer's fingers drummed lightly on the table, indicating something was stirring beneath his surface. The glimmer of uncertainty had grown into contemplation. Perhaps Jake had struck a nerve. And with that nerve came the potential for an alliance, however fragile. But Jake knew he had to be firm in his beliefs and fully committed to his vision. "I understand the inherent risks," Jake pressed, emboldened by the developer's wavering facade. "But if we don't challenge the status quo, we lose the chance to pave our own future. Failure is a part of this process, but so is the possibility of creating something meaningful." As the conversation shifted, Jake engaged the developer in back-and-forth discussions. Details that hadn't seemed possible minutes before now felt within his grasp. Yet, despite the growing possibilities, a storm lurked at the edges of his mind. The anxiety that had accompanied him throughout his life was not totally gone. Deep down, Jake questioned whether he could sustain this newfound resolve against the realities of an industry that had little space for idealism. Just as Jake felt himself beginning to resolve that conflict, the developer leaned forward, a new spark igniting in his eyes, asking questions that would pull Jake deeper into negotiations. The risk remained, shadowed by looming doubts, simmering beneath the calm surface of the conversation. He was one step into a much larger game, and Jake couldn't shake the realization that the most significant battles would not just be against external forces, but within himself, the unwavering search for purpose amidst doubt. The stakes had risen exponentially, and as Jake prepared to respond to the developer's next challenge, he braced for an imminent revelation about his own boundaries and capabilities. How far was he willing to go to reshape not only the farm, but himself amidst the turmoil ahead? Jake's pulse quickened as he watched the developer lean forward, a glimmer of interest igniting the otherwise cool demeanor. The conversation had taken a turn, and for the first time in this meeting, Jake felt the weight of his convictions resonating through the words he chose. Still, doubt loomed like dark clouds ready to unleash a storm that could wash away everything he had been fighting to protect. "There's potential in your idea," the developer admitted, his voice steady but cautious. "But potential doesn't pay the bills. We need something concrete to move forward." Concrete. The word echoed in Jake's mind. It marked the line between abstract ideals and the gritty reality of survival. Could he truly translate his vision into something that not only resonated with the land, but also satisfy the demands of the market? As he sat there, the conflict within him bloomed. Was he about to compromise his ideals for acceptance in a ruthless industry? He'd watched his parents labor with every ounce of their being to nurture the land. Their values felt intertwined with every blade of grass swaying in the wind and every sunbeam penetrating through the thick canopy above. This was more than just a business. It was their life, their legacy. "You mentioned specific metrics," Jake said, attempting to shift the conversation in a direction that felt empowering. "What are the key indicators we're currently monitoring for success? We could include organic yield comparisons in that data." The developer's brow furrowed slightly, but Jake perceived the wheels beginning to turn. "It's about predictability. The markets can be volatile, consumer behavior shifts with trends. So, let's create our trends." Jake leaned in, daringly akin to that boy he once was, unafraid to challenge the norm. "We can generate loyalty through transparency about our practices. If we're upfront about our methods and educate our customers, we create a community invested in our success." Jake's thoughts raced, constructing elaborate scenarios wherein his strategies took shape. What if he could orchestrate something revolutionary? Conjuring a pulse of excitement, he began envisioning community events built around seasonal harvests, classes teaching sustainable farming methods, and open days at the farm for the public. This would not just sell produce, it would cultivate connection. "Connection is fine, Jake," the developer interjected abruptly, breaking Jake's reverie. "But at the end of the day, we must prioritize profits." The grim reminder ground him like an anchor, setting a heavy expectancy in the air between them. How desperately he needed a win, not just for him, but for everything this farm represented. Yet, was he willing to become just another tool for corporate machinery? Jake took a deep breath, forcing his internal conflict to settle. "I understand the importance of profits, but wouldn't it be more advantageous to have a reputation that fosters long-term client relationships instead of chasing short-term gains?" "Let's innovate, adapt. We could set an industry precedent." The developer appeared lost in thought, and a flicker of hope ignited in Jake's chest. Could his commitment to sustainable practices genuinely pave a new pathway? The vision sparked a new fire, raising his belief in himself once more. Each word felt more concrete, as if sloughing off layers of self-doubt. Yet a grim reality crept in. Were those around him as ready to believe? This budding alliance with the developer ignited excitement, but Jake remained acutely aware of the obstacles ahead. The seeds of resistance were firmly embedded within the agricultural world, and pushing against them could trigger backlash. As the meeting drew to a close, Jake sensed a tentative bond had formed. The landscape before him was ripe with potential, urging him to seize the moment. The thought, to fight for the farm, for his family's legacy, and his own aspirations, began crystallizing into an intoxicating resolve. But as he stood to leave, fully entrenched in his vision, a nagging voice whispered the inevitable. If the process faltered, where would that leave him? The other side of this intricate game would not remain passive. He resolved to delve deeper into his methodology, but the shadows of doubt clung to him tighter than before. Just how much was he willing to risk to ignite change, not just in the farm, but within himself? Those questions beckoned, and Jake could feel the storm approaching. The time had come to face not just the challenges on the horizon, but the internal battles that threatened to unseat him. And as he exited, a new weight settled on him. His next move had to be calculated, or he would lose everything. What would he do next to fortify his vision, and how much of his own identity was he prepared to stake in the momentous fight ahead? Jake stepped out of the conference room, absorbing the swirling wind that greeted him like a wild, untamed spirit determined to embrace change. Each gust whispered possibilities, nudging him toward action. But the undercurrent of doubt was a persistent reminder of the risks lingering in the silence of his thoughts. His vision felt both intoxicating and precarious, a spark igniting a fire that could warm him or consume everything in its path. He walked toward his truck, letting the leather of the seats mold to his form as he drove back to the farm. The rural landscape flew past him like a montage of memories. His father's hands, weathered yet strong. His mother sharing laughter around the dinner table, the aromas of the land infusing their lives with purpose. These threads of his past felt like both armor and chains. Could he leverage their legacy without sacrificing their essence? Each week, he watched the competitors streamline operations into stark efficiency, choosing margins over integrity. Was he prepared to buck that trend, knowing the backlash could sever his familial roots? Jake pulled into the farm lot, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The fields stretched before him, untamed and majestic, their raw beauty evoking a sense of protection deep within him. But how could he nurture this land while contending with the corporate machine? His resolve deepened, shifting like the soil beneath his feet. Ideas darted through his mind like bees flitting from flower to flower. He could create an exhibition showcasing their sustainable practices, transforming the workspace into a hub of education, a place for the community to explore, learn, and share perspectives on environmental care. Back in his office, a makeshift space cluttered with blueprints and notes, Jake spread sheets across the desk, allowing the weight of his thoughts to transcribe onto paper. Nothing felt more tangible than words placed with intent. Sustainable farming initiative, education sessions for schools, partnerships with local chefs for farm-to-table events. Each suggestion leapt back at him, an electrifying reminder of his innate ability to inspire. Yet, in moments of clarity, shadows crept closer. Finding partners in his bold quest felt daunting. He couldn't falter if he was to succeed. What if the developer's skepticism echoed in others? What if he stood alone? He could not afford to appear foolish, risking his family's legacy while challenging the ingrained norms. The telephone rang abruptly, pulling him from his spiraling fervor. It was Lisa, a childhood friend now working with a local environmental group. "Jake, I heard you're making some waves. Can we talk? I have ideas that could help you leverage the initiative you mentioned." Her enthusiasm seeped into his hesitation. "Definitely. What are you thinking?" As she shared thoughts on creative campaigns and community engagement, Jake felt the strain of isolation lift slightly. Each suggestion enveloped him in the prospect of collaboration. They discussed how to break through local skepticism by leveraging digital platforms to boost transparency and reach potential allies. She challenged him to pen a proposal that outlined tangible steps toward integrating local voices and practices into the farm's strategy, thus reinforcing its foundation. After hanging up, Jake glanced out toward the land. There, a faint glow of the setting sun washed over the fields, illuminating the potential he felt simmering in his chest. He could redefine success, not just for himself, but for the farming community he held dear. And yet, another question curved into his mind, nagging at the periphery. Was he ready for the backlash that might erupt from disrupting the status quo? With his heart pounding, outlining the initial steps felt like standing at the precipice. He was on the verge of a decision that could alter not only his farming practices, but the very nature of his identity. An urgency bubbled within, and he committed to start drafting the proposal that could stake his claim in the industry. But as his fingers brushed the keyboard, doubt clawed back, and he hesitated once again. What if collaboration failed? What if he was again left feeling isolated, standing before a chasm of unfulfilled promise? The question loomed large, tangled with all he aspired to be and all he feared to lose as he prepared to leap into the unknown. What awaited him beyond that leap, he couldn't yet determine. Each moment felt heavy with tension, and with every keystroke, he understood the challenges ahead would be as formidable as the passions within fueling his ambition. Would he find the support he needed, or would the pursuit of his dream forge a deeper loneliness? Jake stood firm at the crest of his family's land, a sense of stillness washing over him. The day's battles had brought him to this moment, a position of power and clarity. No longer the boy lost in video games, he had transformed into a man of purpose, resolute in defending his grandfather's legacy. He felt the weight of expectations shift in the air as he prepared for the upcoming meeting with the developer. His heart raced, not from fear, but from the flicker of adrenaline coursing through his veins. The tension that once gripped him now served to fuel his resolve. Each stride he took across the fields, the pulsating energy of the freshly tilled earth resonated with the story of persistence and resilience. He had earned every inch of this ground, and with it, a profound understanding of the legacy that belonged to him. As he approached the meeting point, memories of the past flooded his mind. Warm family gatherings, laughter around the dinner table, and the intimate bond he forged with the land as he witnessed his family's toil and triumph. Those moments crafted an unbreakable connection, and now they were more than memories. They were fuel for the fire ignited inside him, propelling him toward an uncertain but compelling future. Jake stepped into the conference room, heart beating rhythmically with determination. The polished table and stark surroundings contrasted sharply with the warmth of his fields, but there was no turning back now. The sleek figure of the developer awaited him, a shroud of cool confidence attempting to dominate the conversation. But Jake welcomed the challenge. He was prepared to embody the essence of his heritage. As the developer launched into his rehearsed pitch, Jake felt the confident poise returning to him. He interjected with conviction. This land isn't a mere venture for profit. It's our heritage and a commitment to sustainable stewardship. He articulated his vision for an innovative future, incorporating community, education, and environmental sustainability. The developer's dismissive chuckle sparked an iron will within Jake. Each dismissal only solidified his resolve. With every argument Jake wielded, preserving not just farmland but a way of life, he felt pieces of his identity layering into a robust armor. Transforming is not merely tearing up the past, it means building upon it, he asserted, standing taller, channeling the generations that shaped him. For the first time he believed the weight of his words could alter the trajectory of his family's legacy. As discussions progressed, Jake proposed practical strategies, championed local partnerships, and called for a shift in priorities. The exchange became a dialogue as opposed to a confrontation, an intimate negotiation rather than a battle. The developer's facade slowly cracked, revealing a flicker of interest amid surprise. Jake lost himself in the passion of his argument, feeling the echoes of his grandfather rend the air like whispers of encouragement. After what felt both like an eternity and a mere heartbeat, the energy in the room shifted. Concessions were offered, ideas bounced back and forth, and a fragile yet invaluable alliance began to take root. The developer finally asked for a collaborative pilot that respected the land while also promising profits. Jake's heart surged. He wasn't just pushing back, he was forging a partnership. Victory washed over him like a force of nature as they shook hands, solidifying his newfound position as a champion of his family's spirit. The deal wouldn't just save the farm, it would catalyze a renaissance of sustainable farming practices that could inspire others. It felt like awakening from a dream. Jake had evolved from complacency into empowerment. I'll not only defend my territory, he thought, I'll reshape how we see agriculture in our community. The freshly planted seeds of change were nurtured not only by the soil, but by the renewed sense of self that grounded him. As he exited the building, the rush of wind greeted him again, this time feeling like a love letter from the universe. Jake understood that he had conquered both the external challenges and the internal fears that had long plagued him. He stood at the apex of transformation, a culmination of hard work, resilience, and courage that had reshaped not only his life, but the lives of all who shared in his legacy. The next morning, standing on his land sliced with the gold hues of dawn, he could finally breathe deeply. He was no longer running away from responsibility. He had embraced it, proving to himself and the world that he was no longer just a lazy boy, but a custodian of legacy, a leader driven by purpose. This was his triumph, a testament not only to reclaiming his family's legacy, but to constructing a new pathway for the future. Jake smiled, ready for whatever came next, his heart echoing with the promise of possibility. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.